Order, please. Before we begin the day routine, the evening's late debate was submitted by the honourable member for Cape Breton Centre. Therefore, be resolved, the Minister of Transportation make a proper overpass, a part of Highway 103 Twinning, where it intersects with the Beachville Lakeside Timberlea Rails to Trails. Be debate this evening at 6 p.m. As well, before we begin the day proceedings, I'd like to beg the attention of the House to bring to your attention someone who's in the Speaker's Gallery today who I'd like to introduce the House. Mrs. Betty Adams, who is from Southampton, Cumberland County, is visiting the legislature for the first time. Betty is a well-known volunteer throughout the county of Cumberland, and in fact, this year was one of the nominees for the Cumberland County Volunteer of the Year. So Betty's here today to watch the proceedings of the House, and she's with her son, Mr. Gordon Adams, who was with the Public Service Commission for the province of Nova Scotia. So I'd ask Betty and Gordon to please rise and receive the warm welcome of the House. Thank you, Betty. We certainly hope you enjoy the proceedings today. The Honourable Minister of Natural Resources.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I stand either on a point of order or information for the House, and I guess you'll have to declare which it is. Yesterday in question period, I was asked about a meeting with CFIA, HRM, and my department over the infested area here in HRM. And I'm pleased to inform the House that my department has been very forthright in meeting with the other jurisdictions onto this to try to come to a conclusion. And I'm here to inform the House that the meeting will take place today here at the Legislature in the UNIAC room at 3:30, and I invite the member from the NDP caucus, and I also would like to invite a member from the Liberal caucus to join us at that meeting at 3:30.
Thank you. The Honourable the Premier.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And I wish to do an introduction. I would like to draw to the attention of members of the House that in the gallery opposite me is a great friend of the province of Nova Scotia, Dr. Sheila Brown, who is the president of Mount St. Vincent University. And I would ask Dr. Brown to rise and to receive the greetings of the House.
Certainly welcome Dr. Brown to the House today. Begin the day routine presenting reading petitions. The honourable member for Sackville-Cobequid on introduction.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to draw attention to the West Gallery, and we have Carla Mansfield, Blair Mansfield, and Evelyn Williamson, and they're with the Fabry Information and Support Group. So I'd like to, they're here to listen to some of the proceedings today, so I would like all members to give them a warm welcome today. Thank you.
Thank you. The honourable member for Chester St. Margaret's on introduction.
Mr. Speaker, I very much appreciate this opportunity of introducing in the Speaker's Gallery people that are members of the Theatre Nova Scotia. And I would specifically ask if Christopher Shore and Jolene Pattison, and I don't know if Judy Reed showed her, but please, if you stand up, we very much appreciate that. I will introduce the bill, and they're very knowledgeable of it, but Theatre Nova Scotia is often, with the dedication these people have and their colleagues, that's why it is so good in Nova Scotia. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Presenting reading petitions. Presenting reports of committees. Tabling reports, regulations, and other papers. The Honourable Minister of the Environment and Labour.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I beg leave to table a report of the Superintendent of Pensions of the Administration of the Pension Benefits Act for the year ending March 31st, 2003.
Table. The Honourable Minister of the Environment and Labour.
Mr. Speaker, as this is National Safe Drinking Water Week, I beg leave to table the document entitled A Guide for Private Well Owners, which is a new education guide to help well owners protect their water.
Can I get a copy? Document is tabled. Statements by ministers. The Honourable Minister of Human Resources.
Mr. Speaker, I am pleased to rise in the House today to make a statement about the government's policy regarding the public reporting of pay for performance for senior officials within the government of Nova Scotia. Mr. Speaker, I think it's important for the House to understand what performance pay is and how it is used in our civil service to reward the superior performance that ultimately ensures Nova Scotians receive high-quality government programs and services. It is a fact that most provincial governments have some version of management-level performance pay. At the deputy level, a pay-for-performance system is used in 3 provinces, 2 territories, and the federal government. Performance incentives are also common in the private sector. Performance pay is seen as a key tool to help government attract and retain senior employees. Pressure to recruit and retain management staff is increasing in all sectors as Canadians' aging workforce moves through to retirement. We promised Nova Scotians in 1999 that a portion of compensation for senior officials would be based on performance. That commitment was fulfilled in 2002 with the introduction of 2 separate performance pay plans. One program is for employees in the Management Classification Plan, or MCP as it is known. It is administered by the Public Service Commission. This is designed to ensure that management employees move through their salary scales in a way that is comparable to unionized employees, who get regular step increases according to their collective agreements. The other program is for senior officials, mainly deputy ministers and assistant deputy ministers, and is administered by the Treasury and Policy Board. This plan has slightly different criteria that factors in an individual's personal performance and that of the department and government as a whole. Mr. Speaker, that brings me to the issue at hand. As you know, Mr. Speaker, government reports salaries of all civil servants in the supplement to the public accounts every year. The public can see the total amount earned by any individual in any given fiscal year. This includes their salary, acting pay, and any performance-based pay. We are fully accountable to the public in this way. However, we recognize, Mr. Speaker, that there is an interest to know the performance-based amount of this total. Government has received several requests for this information from opposition members and others. Therefore, I wish to announce that effective immediately, it will be the policy of this government to provide individual pay-for-performance amounts for senior officials on an annual basis in the supplement to the public accounts. This information will also be provided for executive assistants who are contract employees, not civil servants. In addition, individual amounts paid for the last fiscal year, 2002-2003, will be compiled and provided as soon as possible. Mr. Speaker, we do this for the sake of openness. Although we must recognize that at the heart of this issue is the need to compensate all employees fairly. To keep the best possible leaders in our system, we must offer a competitive compensation package. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Now a member for Cape Breton Nova.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, when people do the right thing, it's important to recognize that. Without referring to the motivation for today's decision, Mr. Speaker, I want to recognize the fact that this minister has finally done the right thing. There you go, buddy. The minister talks about fairness to staff, ensuring access to these bonuses. What was missing for the last few months in the past 5 years has been fairness to taxpayers. Right on. Our caucus does not disagree with this concept of performances, in this incentives or bonuses, where the criteria is clearly spelled out. Right on. We also believe that the civil servants have a responsibility to be accountable, and a part of that accountability deals with compensation. Mr. Speaker, the steps taken today by this government is a positive measure, but it's still only a partial solution. Right until all bonuses for government staff, senior officials, political staff, and anyone on the public payroll are disclosed, the government cannot make claims to be open and accountable. Right, We must remember, Mr. Speaker, that this government was given the Code of Silence Award by the Canadian Association of Journalism. And we shouldn't forget that this government has been taken to court for access to information more than any other government in recent memory. Good work, while I support this small step forward, I find it unfortunate that it takes pressure from the opposition, the media, the public, and even the courts to make this government accountable. Hear, hear. Hear, hear. I think all Nova Scotians look forward to a day when their government is proactive about releasing information instead of dragging and kicking and screaming to do so. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Hear, hear.
The honourable member for Cape Breton West.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I guess, in short, I'm almost at a loss for words what we've witnessed here today. It's a complete conversion on the way to Damascus. Mr. Speaker, again I quote from the Tory Blue Book and the commitment by the leader of the Conservative Party, now Premier, in 1998. Nova Scotians expect their government to conduct the people's business in the open and to provide the public with effective opportunities for input. We expect our elected officials to be accountable to their constituents, ensuring that decisions are always made in the public interest. Well, Mr. Speaker, what we have seen here over the last several weeks is a government that hides under the veil of secrecy. And it was only by public embarrassment to the Premier yesterday during question period that he finally had a break of conscience on what his government was attempting to do. Mr. Speaker, providing in public the bonuses for some public officials but not others raises the question of the integrity of this government. And that, Mr. Speaker, speaks to the very heart of what the Premier says he stands for as Premier and leader of the Conservative Party of Nova Scotia. And I say shame that it had to come to this level. And yet, Mr. Speaker, by the minister who just spoke, her own admission is that we have to still go and ferret out as to where this information is, despite the fact that the Minister of Finance, in his submission before estimates the other day, indicated that some 200 members of the public service are receiving bonuses, or whatever term you want to use. They're receiving salary enhancements, and they then refuse to release the names and the amounts that they receive. So I would say we welcome any step towards making the decision in the right way. Anything. But it's almost unbearable to think that this Premier and this government has slipped that much on what they say they stood for when they first got elected. Thank you.
Any further statements by ministers? Government notice of motion. The Honourable Minister of Education.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to read this resolution. Just in doing, the Premier introduced Dr. Brown, and of course she's the president of Mount St. Vincent University, who has a very strong international connection. As I had mentioned in the House the other day, indeed, her Faculty of Education is providing training for all of the school principals in the country of Jamaica. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the province and the federal government have signed an agreement to enable international students that graduate from Nova Scotia's universities and colleges to live and work in our province for a second year, and whereas this agreement will enable international students to increase their work experience with Nova Scotia employers and also help narrow the skills gap by meeting the needs of our labour market as part of Skills Nova Scotia, and whereas an extra year of work in the province will result in stronger ties to communities and further increase the likelihood that the graduates will settle in Nova Scotia, increasing our population and helping to grow our economy. Therefore, be it resolved that all members of this House acknowledge the importance of this agreement and how it will help narrow the skills gap and grow our economy. And Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
Question for waiver? Is agreed? All those in favour say aye. Aye. Counterminded nay. Motion is carried. The Honourable the Premier.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas this spring, this city lost an individual who has made a lasting impression on the landscape surrounding us. That is Bill Lydon. Whereas Bill was a principal architect with Lydon Lynch Architects, a firm he established with Andy Lynch in 1979, through which his designs focused on encouraging community participation and uplifting community spirit. And whereas Bill's inspiration touched and improved landmarks such as St. Mary's Basilica, the new Celtic Cross in St. Patrick's Green, Toronto's harbourfront, and the restoration of Halifax's historic properties, and his advice and work also reached across this country and abroad. Therefore be it resolved that this House salute the tremendous life and the lasting contributions of Bill Lydon and express its sympathies to his wife Rosalie and the legacy of which he was most proud of, his son Chris. I ask for waiver of notice and passage without debate.
Question for waivers, is it agreed? All those in favor say aye. Contrary-minded, nay. Motion is carried. The Honourable Minister of Health.
Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas May 3rd to 9th is Mental Health Week all across Canada, and whereas 1 in 5 Canadians are affected by mental illness in their lifetimes, and most Nova Scotians will be indirectly affected by mental illness through relationships with friends, family members, and co-workers. And whereas each year the Canadian Mental Health Association provides direct service to more than 100,000 Canadians through the combined efforts of more than 10,000 volunteers and staff in locally run organizations in all provinces and territories and branches in more than 135 communities. Therefore, be it resolved that all members of the House recognize May 3rd to 9th as Mental Health Week and acknowledge the work done in this province to combat mental health problems and emotional disorders. Mr. Speaker, I seek waiver of notice and passage without debate.
Question for waivers, is it agreed? All those in favor say aye. Contrary-minded, nay. Motion is carried. The Honourable Minister of Community Services on introduction.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, friends of this province, but specifically friends of children and families in this province are here in the gallery here today, and specifically I make reference to Heather Hanson-Dunbar and her assistant Michelle Morash with kids and kids daycare, and also with the private licensed Administrators Association are here with us in your gallery today. Mr. Speaker, I'd ask them to stand up and accept the warm greetings from the House.
Thank you. We appreciate our visitors in the gallery today. The Honourable Minister of Health.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas on May 1st, 2 40-foot containers filled with medical equipment and supplies arrived in the African country of Cameroon through Rotary International's Lend a Hand project. And whereas organizations, hospitals, and individuals from across the province, from Cape Breton to Yarmouth, donated these pieces of equipment and supplies. And whereas for the sick and ailing of Cameroon, clean birthing beds will replace rusting, aged equipment, mechanical beds will add comfort for patients, and newborn babies will have a new baby warmer station. Therefore, be it resolved that all members of the House recognize the generosity and contribution of individuals, hospitals, and communities across the province who gave their gift of better health care. Mr. Speaker, I seek waiver of notice and passage without debate.
Mr. Waivers, is it agreed? All those in favor say aye. Contrary-minded, nay. Motion is carried. The Honourable Minister of Education.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Lunenburg Academy is holding a 2-day celebration of learning this week, whereas the celebration of learning displays talent and school projects of the primary to 12 students in Lunenburg schools, whereas the community pride for its school students and for the 109-year-old Lunenburg Academy was well demonstrated last evening when the celebration of learning attracted over 300 visitors. Therefore, be it resolved that the members of this House of Assembly congratulate the primary to 12 students in Lunenburg, their administrators, teachers, and classroom assistants, and the Lunenburg Academy School Advisory Council for another very successful celebration of learning. And Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice.
Request for waiver is agreed. All those in favor say aye. Countermanded nay. Motion is carried. Introduction of bills. The honourable member for Chester St. Margaret's.
Mr. Speaker, it's my pleasure and honor to introduce a bill, an act to amend Chapter 99 of the Acts of 1951, an act to incorporate the Nova Scotia Drama League.
The honourable member for Chester St. Margaret's begs leave to introduce a bill entitled An Act to Amend Chapter 99 of the Acts of 1951, an act to incorporate the Nova Scotia Drama League.
Bill 71, entitled An Act to Amend Chapter 99 of the Acts of 1951, an act to incorporate the Nova Scotia Drama League.
Or this bill be read a second time at a future date. Notice of motion. The honourable leader of the official opposition.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the Elizabeth Fry Society of Mainland Nova Scotia is a non-profit organization established in 1982 to work with women in conflict with the law and those at risk of coming into conflict with the law. And whereas this Saturday evening, May 8th, the Elizabeth Fry Society is celebrating National E-Fry Week, holding its 6th annual Rebels with a Cause event to honor 5 outstanding women who have championed issues of human rights and social equality. And whereas the worthy recipients of this year's awards are East Preston community worker Rosemary Brooks, children and women's advocate Kathy Love, social worker MLA for Halifax Needham, and our NDP caucus colleague Maureen McDonald, educator and social justice advocate Sister Mary Morris, and community development activist Philippa Pictou. Therefore, be it resolved that this House extends sincere congratulations to this year's Rebels with a Cause, Rosemary Brooks, Kathy Love, Maureen McDonald, Sister Mary Morris, and Philippa Pictou, as they are honored this Saturday night for their advocacy work on behalf of women, children, and families in our community. And Mr. Speaker, I would request waiver and passage without debate.
Request for waiver is agreed. All those in favor say aye. Countermanded nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Annapolis.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the Annapolis Valley Campus Center of Geographic Science held their spring convocation on Saturday, May 1st, 2004, and whereas the Governor General's Academic Medal is awarded to the graduate student of the College Diploma Program who has achieved the highest academic standing, and whereas Tanya Hines, a graduate of the Cartography Digital Mapping Program, was the recipient of the Governor General's Academic Medal. Therefore, be it resolved that all members of this House congratulate Tanya Hines and all graduates of this fine Nova Scotia institution. Mr. Speaker, I ask for waiver of notice and passage without debate.
Question for waiver is agreed. All those in favor say aye. Countermanded nay. Motion is carried. The Honourable the Premier.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the province of Nova Scotia recognizes Roger Bannister for his running the first under 4-minute mile 50 years ago, a monumental athletic achievement which many believed would never be achieved. Whereas we recognize his teammates, Chris Brasher, for pacing the first half, and Chris Chataway for pacing Bannister in the last half of the first under 4-minute mile. Whereas we request Chris Chataway to give some encouragement and advice to his Canadian relatives, one is an MLA, so they can increase their own speed when they are running. Therefore, be it resolved, members of this House of Assembly applaud the dedication and extensive training that went into achieving this wonderful athletic achievement by one of the last century's most accomplished athletes and his teammates, and I request waiver of notice.
Request for waiver is it agreed? All those in favor say aye. Countermanded nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Cole Harbour Eastern Passage.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the Drug Abuse Resistance Education Program, or DARE, provides students with a knowledge base on the effects of drug abuse that goes beyond the physical ramifications and extends to emotional, social, and economic aspects of life. Whereas DARE builds decision-making and problem-solving skills and strategies to help students make informed decisions and resist drug use, peer pressure, and violence, and provide students with alternative to drug use. Whereas Caldwell Road Elementary School's grade 6 students will celebrate the completion of their Project DARE program on May 19th. Therefore, be it resolved that this House congratulate Principal David Nogler, Vice Principal Ann Ring, grade 6 teachers Evelyn McMullen, Patricia Sanford, Michelle Bedard, RCMB Constable Peter Marshall, and all the grade 6 students at Caldwell Road Elementary School on their successful completion of the DARE program. And I ask for waiver, Mr. Speaker.
Request for waivers is agreed. All those in favor say aye. Contrary-minded, nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Kings West.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice on the future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Sandy Bentley was chosen Volunteer of the Year for Berwick, and whereas many organizations benefited from Sandy's involvement, it was Berwick and Kings County Guiding, the Block Parent Association, the Berwick Diabetes Support Group that were major recipients. And whereas Sandy wore 4 hats for Girl Guides as a guider with First Berwick Brownies and First Berwick Sparks, Deputy Kings 1 Area Camp Advisor and District Commissioner. Therefore, be it resolved that all members of this House extend congratulations to Sandy Bentley on not only being Berwick Volunteer of the Year, but also for her recognition through Sport and Recreation Nova Scotia at this year's annual Volunteer Awards ceremony. Mr. Speaker, I ask for waiver of notice and passage without debate.
Request for waivers is agreed. All those in favor say aye. Contrary-minded, nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Colchester, Musquodoboit Valley.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the forest industry is the backbone of Nova Scotia's economy with a trade balance of $1.1 billion while employing more than 18,000 people directly and indirectly, and whereas it is such a pleasure to see elementary school students learn about this vital industry as part of National Forest Week, and whereas yesterday, Mr. Warren Murley, president of the Nova Scotia Forest Products Association, and I had the pleasure of attending with 52 grade 4 and grade 5 students from Redcliffe Middle School a ceremony to plant red and white spruce seedlings in the Children's Special Forest situated behind the Forest Products Association office in Hildon, Colchester County, which resides in the beautiful Colchester Musquodoboit Valley. Therefore, be it resolved that members of this House of Assembly compliment the Nova Scotia Forest Products Association for their sincere expression of interest in today's youth, while also commending the participating students from Redcliffe School and their teacher, Mr. Owen Ferguson, who took part in yesterday's planting ceremony. And I request waiver notice.
Waivers is agreed.
Mr. Speaker, thank you.
All those in favor say aye. Contrary-minded, nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Hants East.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas tourism in Nova Scotia is a billion-dollar industry, and whereas the first impression that tourists get from Nova Scotians should be one of helpfulness and friendliness from the front desk workers in the tourism industry. And whereas on April 30th, 2004, Mrs. Joan Tomlinson of Minesville was awarded the Superhost Customer Service Award by the Central Nova Tourist Association at their awards banquet for her excellence in dealing with the public in the Maitland Information Centre. Therefore, be it resolved that this House of Assembly congratulate Mrs. Tomlinson on winning the Superhost Customer Service Award and for presenting the best of Nova Scotians to visitors to our fair province. And Mr. Speaker, I request waiver notice and passage without debate.
Question for waivers is agreed. All those in favor say aye. Contrary-minded, nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Victoria the Lakes.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas public servants are the unsung heroes of government activity, and whereas Dr. Wilf Creighton, a career civil servant who served this province for many years as a forester for 2 decades and as Minister of Lands and Forests, celebrates his 100th birthday today, and whereas Dr. Creighton, who did so much to manage our forests, has expressed concern over the overuse of clear cutting, concerns that have been largely ignored by the Department of Natural Resources. Therefore, be it resolved that this House honour the service of Dr. Creighton by acknowledging his concerns about the state of our forests and assuring him that members of this House will place forest management on a high priority. Mr. Speaker, I ask for waiver of notice and passage without debate.
Question for waivers is agreed. All those in favor say aye. Contrary-minded, nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Guysborough Sheet Harbour.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the Group of 9 Nova Scotia's Coalition of Seniors Organization recently wrote to the Prime Minister with a copy to all 3 party leaders in Nova Scotia, and whereas the Group of 9 told the Prime Minister that it was extremely disappointed with Ottawa's budgetary response to the Romano Report, and whereas the Group of 9 also noted that the March 2004 budget failed to allow for any concrete new healthcare initiatives, and that the Romano report has been before the federal government with no substantive action. Therefore, be it resolved that members of this House congratulate the Group of 9 for so forcefully representing the interests of Nova Scotia seniors by telling the Prime Minister, and I quote, "The federal government's inaction to date has not gone unnoticed by Nova Scotia's 130,000 seniors." And Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
Request for waiver, is it agreed? All those in favor say aye. Counterminded, nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Pictou West.
Sorry. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice, and on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Sean McNamara of Pictou has been the driving force behind the Rebecca Gillis Trust Fund, which last year raised more than $20,000 to assist this 6-year-old child and her family to defray costs during her heart operation in Toronto. And whereas the committee, in their promise to help the community, have now turned their efforts to raising money for the IWK Hospital. And whereas Sean and his team of volunteers have been busy over the past few weeks with community auctions, breakfasts, boot drives, recycling collection, and other fundraising, therefore be resolved that this legislature thank Sean McNamara and his team of volunteers for all their hard work in supporting the children of our communities. And Mr. Speaker, I request waiver and passage without debate.
Request for waiver, is it agreed? All those in favor say aye. Counterminded, nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Cape Breton West.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas in 1998 there were 3,234 video lotto terminals in Nova Scotia, and whereas in 2004 there are 3,800 video lotto terminals in use in Nova Scotia. And whereas in June 1998, the member for Pictou Centre was successful in having his private members bill called the Video Lottery Moratorium Act passed, claiming this bill would, quote, place a freeze on video lottery terminals currently in place in Nova Scotia. Therefore, be it resolved that the member for Pictou Centre, now Premier of Nova Scotia, explain the wide gap between his words and his actions. Mr. Speaker, I would ask for a waiver of notice.
Question waiver? Here no. Notice is tabled. The Honourable Minister of Economic Development.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the Webby Award, honoring people for their creativity in digital media while uniting members across the world for a dazzling celebration of the best and the brightest, whereas the original Webby Awards, of which there are 22 categories, first took place in 1999 in San Francisco, with 3,000 attendees and another 115,000 participating by voting online, and whereas the CBC Halifax Explosion website has been nominated for a Webby Award in 2004 in the education category, therefore be it resolved, MLAs congratulate and recognize the significant creativity, talented individuals at CBC here in Halifax in putting together the Halifax Explosion website, which has attracted attention around the globe. And I respectfully request waiver of notice.
Request for waiver, is it agreed? All those in favor say aye. Counterminded, nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Dartmouth East.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the Department of Environment and Labour recently extended a moratorium on the spreading of biosolids in Nova Scotia after much public outcry, and whereas the process used to stabilize the sludge to produce the biosolids only reduces the pathogens present in the sludge, and whereas there is much concern and controversy surrounding this issue since we will be growing our food crops in biosolids. Therefore, be it resolved that this government go back to the drawing board and design regulations instead of only guidelines for the spreading of biosolids. And Mr. Speaker, I ask for waiver and passage without debate.
Request for waiver, is it agreed? Here no. Notice is tabled. The honourable member for Kings West.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Alison Mahar was a former student and used her capable writing skills to enter a Mother's Day contest on the Regis and Kelly show, and whereas this entry lovingly expressed what Mary Norman meant in her life as a 15-year-old friend of her daughter Karen, and in her words she was a mentor helping her through many personal challenges, And whereas the producers of the Regis and Kelly show were so touched by Allison's letter, they hired Canadian decorating guru Debbie Travis as a consultant on the $50,000 kitchen renovation as winner of the Mother's Day Dream Come True celebration. Therefore, be it resolved that all members of this House extend congratulations to Allison, Mary, and Brian Norman for a special Mother's Day, May 9, 2004. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
Request for waivers, is it agreed? All those in favor say aye. Contrary-minded, nay. Motion is carried. The Honourable the Deputy Premier.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice on future day I shall move adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Nova Scotia's volunteer firefighters are a crucial component of our emergency response team, and whereas as a volunteer with the Windsor Volunteer Fire Department for 18 years, Dan Boyd has responded to every conceivable call any time of the day or night, and whereas Dan, a familiar person to many in this House, having worked for the PC caucus for the past 14 years, has always served simply because of a strong sense of duty to his community without ever expecting as much as a thank you for his actions. Therefore, be it resolved that all members of this House commend Dan Boyd on his years of service to his local community, which have come to a close, offering emergency response for almost 2 decades, and thank his wife and daughter for sacrificing those precious hours lost at any hour of the day or night when the beeper went off. Mr. Speaker, I ask for waiver and passage without debate.
Request for waivers, is it agreed? All those in favor say aye. Contrary-minded, nay. Motion is carried. The Honourable Member for Dartmouth South Portland Valley.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice that on a future day, I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas volunteers add immeasurable value to our communities through their contributions, and whereas John Ryan has volunteered with the Canadian Cancer Society, Victorian Order of Nurses, Atlantic Seniors Health Promotion Network, and the Nova Scotia Citizens Health Care Network, the Nova Scotia Medication Awareness Committee, Canadian Pensioners Concern, and other worthy organizations and causes. And whereas Mr. Ryan was recently recognized by the Halifax Regional Municipality and the province of Nova Scotia during Volunteer Week for his volunteer efforts that span more than 30 years. Therefore, be it resolved that the members of the Nova Scotia Legislature congratulate John Ryan for his significant volunteer efforts and wish him well in the future. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver and passage without debate.
Request for waivers, is it agreed? All those in favor say aye. Contrary-minded, nay. Motion is carried. The Honourable Member for Preston.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas in August 2004 will mark 30 years for Mr. Jimmy Flynn as being an ambassador of good cheer for all Canadians, and whereas Mr. Jimmy Flynn acquired his first professional job in British Columbia after playing and singing all the way across Canada, whereas he has grown over the past 30 years to be a very respected entertainer in the entertainment business while maintaining his deep family roots. Therefore, it be resolved that all members of this House congratulate Mr. Jimmy Flynn and wish him every success in his career and future. I'd ask for waiver.
Request for waivers, is it agreed? All those in favor say aye. Contrary-minded, nay. Motion is carried. The Honourable Minister of Tourism and Culture.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the Honourable Gerald Doucette, who served as a dedicated MLA for the constituency of Richmond, was at Pier 21 last night, May 5th, releasing a book he has authored titled Acadian Footprints, The Roots and Reflections of Gerald Jerry Doucette. And whereas his autobiography recounts his upbringing in Grand Etang, Cape Breton, his education at St. Francis Xavier University, his career in the field of law, his election and appointment as Minister of Education, his return to law and expansion into consulting and business development. And whereas Mr. Doucette offers his personal opinion of Acadian history throughout his years as a Nova Scotian, which is particularly relevant in light of this year's 2004 Congrès Mondial Acadien. Therefore, be it resolved that the members of this House acknowledge and congratulate the Honourable Gerald Doucette on this achievement. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
Request for waivers, is it agreed? All those in favor say aye. Contrary-minded, nay. Motion is carried. The Honourable Member for Cape Breton Nova.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the 36th annual Hazo Wizzo Bazaar was held Wednesday, May 5th, 2004 at the Temple Sons of Israel Synagogue, Sydney, Nova Scotia. And whereas this event is the sole public fundraiser taken on by the Jewish community. And whereas each year the proceeds goes towards youth programs in Israel and a portion goes to local charitable organizations, this year the Almost Home Shelter will be a benefit. Therefore, be it resolved that the members of this Legislative Assembly congratulate the Hadassah Wizzo Bazaar Committee and volunteers on their successful 36th annual Hazo Wizzo Bazaar. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver and passage without debate.
Agreed. Request for waivers is agreed. All those in favor say aye. Contrary-minded, nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Halifax Clayton Park.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the Metropolis Centre has been established to study diversity issues and immigration throughout Atlantic Canada, and whereas this project is set up to develop and encourage partnerships among government, non-government, and academic institutions to promote policy and research relating to immigration, cultural diversity, in addition to population migration. And whereas St. Mary's and Dalhousie are both partners, along with St. Thomas and Université de Moncton, in the Metropolis project, which will be linked to Metropolis centres from across Canada. Therefore, be it resolved, members of this House congratulate St. Mary's and Dalhousie for taking this step to promote diversity throughout Atlantic Canada. Mr. Speaker, I ask for waiver of notice and passage without debate.
Question for waivers is agreed. All those in favor say aye. Contrary-minded, nay. Motion is carried. The Honourable Minister of Community Services.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, I'm very pleased to stand here today to give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the Canadian Cancer Society bestows a national award to an individual or organization on behalf of the Canadian public and people living with cancer for public policies that will prevent cancer and help those touched by cancer. And whereas the bylaw the town of Wolfville recently adopted to make the town 100% smoke-free will play a significant role in the health of this popular and picturesque university community, its citizens, and anyone who visits it and studies there. Whereas the Canadian Cancer Society has chosen the town of Wolfville to receive this important national award to express their gratitude, therefore be it resolved that all members of this House commend Mayor Bob Stead and the Town of Wolfville Council for being the first to implement 100% smoke-free places bylaw in Nova Scotia and for receiving the Canadian Cancer Society's national recognition for this measure. And Mr. Speaker, I request waiver.
Waiver is agreed. All those in favor say aye. Contrary-minded, nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Timberlea Prospect.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'll be asking for waiver and passage without debate. I hereby give notice on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Spencer Scott of Brookside Junior High was announced as the winner of the Mainland North Drug Awareness Poster Contest yesterday here in our legislature, whereas this grade 6 student won a bicycle for his efforts, and whereas Spencer's poster demonstrates originality and artistic flair. Therefore, be it resolved that the Nova Scotia Legislature congratulates Spencer Scott and all Brookside Junior High students for their contributions to this poster contest. I ask for waiver and passage without debate, Mr. Speaker.
Question for waivers is agreed. All those in favor say aye. Contrary-minded, nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Halifax Clayton Park.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas in January of this year, Richard Homburg, Chair and CEO of Homburg Investment Inc., announced $1.5 million donation to establish the Homburg International Mobility Awards. And whereas up to 8 awards will be presented to students for international exchange, educational activities over the next 5 years, and whereas this will provide St. Mary's students with an enhanced global experience needed in today's economy. Therefore, be it resolved, the members of this House acknowledge the generosity of Homburg Investment Inc. and Richard Homburg. Mr. Speaker, I ask for waiver of notice and passage without debate.
Question for waivers is agreed. All those in favor say aye. Contrary-minded, nay. Motion is carried. The Honourable Minister of Health.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas John McDonnell, President of the Nova Scotia Progressive Conservative Party, is a native of Mariner Drive in Antigonish, and whereas Mr. John Arthur Murphy, President of the Nova Scotia Democratic Party, is a resident of Beaver Meadow, Antigonish County, and whereas Mr. David Cameron, President of the Nova Scotia Liberal Party, is a native of Loch Harbour, Antigonish County, therefore be it resolved that all members of this House recognize the enormous contribution that Antigonish makes to the political landscape of this province. Mr. Speaker, I seek waiver of notice and passage without debate.
Question waivers is agreed. All those in favor say aye. Contrary-minded, nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Pictou West.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas there are 200 substandard bridges in Nova Scotia, many built in the era of horse and buggy, and whereas when questioned on his government's plan to address this issue, the minister stated we shouldn't be concerned with the age of our bridges, and whereas the minister went on to cite older bridges in Europe, specifically London Bridge, therefore it be resolved that the minister brush up on his children's songs and familiarize himself with the story of London Bridge before he cites it as a glowing example of bridge architecture. And Mr. Speaker, I request waiver and passage without debate.
Waivers it agreed? Here no. Notice is tabled. Any further? The Honourable Minister of Justice.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Whereas, Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the members of our volunteer fire departments make a valuable contribution to the communities they serve, and whereas Terry G. Conrad, retired Chief of Lunenburg and District Fire Department, has been committed to serving the people of Lunenburg area for 30 years through service with the Volunteer Fire Service, and whereas Mr. Conrad is retiring from the Lunenburg and District Fire Department this year after 30 years of dedicated service.
Order, please. The Honourable Minister of Justice.
Thank you. Mr. Speaker, do you want me to begin from the beginning, as they say?
Just continue where you left off.
Wherever that was, Mr. Speaker. I think I meant...
Order, please. Very difficult for the clerks to hear the resolutions, which they need to for the recordings. The Honourable Minister of Justice.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Whereas the members of our volunteer fire departments make a valuable contribution to the communities they serve, and whereas Terry G. Conrad, retired Chief of the Lunenburg and District Fire Department, has been committed to serving the people of Lunenburg area through service with the Volunteer Fire Service, and whereas Mr. Conrad is retiring from the Lunenburg and District Fire Department this year after 30 years of dedicated service. Therefore, it be resolved that the members of the House of Assembly thank Mr. Terry G. Conrad for the dedicated service he has provided to his community as a volunteer firefighter over the years and express our sincere appreciation for his efforts on our behalf. Mr. Speaker, I ask for waiver of notice and passage without debate.
Question for waivers, is it agreed? All those in favor say aye. Counterminded nay. Motion is carried. The Honourable Member for Cape Breton Nova.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the palliative care team includes doctors, nurses who specialize in the field of end-of-life care, family physicians, volunteers, social workers, spiritual counselors, and pharmacists. And whereas a team with these people strive to relieve pain and improve the quality of life for people who are living in advanced stages of illness, and to provide bereavement support and services. Whereas DHAs in their budgets have raised concerns about the lack of palliative care services. Therefore, be it resolved that during this week of National Hospice Palliative Care Week, the government listen to the concerns raised by DHAs when they say they need funding for palliative care services. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver and passage without debate.
Question waivers, is it agreed? Here no. The notice is tabled. The Honourable Minister of Education.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas John Stanfield was named playoff MVP in the Labatt West Colchester Commercial Hockey League, and whereas John Stanfield led the System Care Silver Bullets to its first Labatt West Colchester Commercial Hockey League title, whereas John Stanfield scored the first goal in the 7th and deciding game in which the System Care Silver Bullets defeated three-time defending champion Heroes Pub, therefore be it resolved that all members of this House congratulate John Stanfield on being named 2004 playoff MVP in the Labatt West Colchester Commercial Hockey League, and also recognize him and his teammates on winning the Labatt West Colchester Commercial Hockey League Championship. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice.
Request for waivers, is it agreed? All those in favor say aye. Counterminded nay. Motion is carried. The Honourable Member for Timberlea Prospect.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the St. Margaret's Masters Hockey League is celebrating its 10th anniversary, whereas league statistician and legendary old-timers hockey player Lloyd McRae has compiled a history of this league, and whereas this league portrays the true spirit of old-timers hockey, therefore be it resolved that the Nova Scotia Legislature recognize Lloyd McRae for his efforts and congratulate the members of the St. Margaret's Bay Masters Hockey League on its 10th anniversary. I ask for waiver and passage without debate, Mr. Speaker.
Is it agreed? All those in favor say aye. Contrary-minded, nay. Motion is carried. The Honourable Minister of Justice.
Yes, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas local radio station CKBW began broadcasting to residents of the South Shore over 56 years ago. And whereas CKBW is counted on by its listeners to keep them informed about what is going on in their community and the province. And whereas CKBW has been recognized for its new coverage of a police chase and standoff which occurred in Bridgewater area and has been awarded a medallion for excellence in journalism from the Atlantic Journalism Awards held recently in Halifax. Therefore, be it resolved that the members of the House of Assembly congratulate CKBW on being awarded a medallion for excellence in journalism and thank them for continuing to provide quality information to South Shore listeners. Mr. Speaker, I waive waiver of notice and passage without debate.
Mr. Waiver, is it agreed? All those in favor say aye. Contrary-minded, nay. Motion is carried. Order, please. Orders of the day or questions put by members. Question period begin at 1:01 and at 2:01. The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question will be for the Premier. Heritage Gas officially hooked up the first residential natural gas customers in Dartmouth last January. At the kickoff event, the Premier made the following statement: how many homes sign up will ultimately be determined by the competitive nature of natural gas. The Premier's statement couldn't be more true. Allowing Nova Scotia businesses a chance to compete in offering these services will encourage more people to look at natural gas as an alternative. The problem, Mr. Speaker, is that Heritage Gas is poised to make an announcement next week that they will have a preferred arrangement with a national company to hook up gas lines to residential customers. So my question is this: will the Premier tell this House what effect he believes this announcement will have on Nova Scotia businesses?
The Honourable the Premier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I refer that to the Acting Minister of Energy.
The Honourable Minister of Energy. Acting Minister of Energy.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, as the honourable member has stated, Heritage Gas has been awarded the commercial franchise to distribute gas here in Nova Scotia, and certainly the model, a market-driven model, is the one that Nova Scotians and this government prefers. Consultations on in what form that will be delivered and how fast that will be rolled out certainly will be announced by the company in due course as they continue to develop their business model and their rollout plan.
Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition on your first supplementary.
Well, Mr. Speaker, this development will come as a significant disappointment to the many small businesses in this industry. Many established local companies have been planning to expand into residential natural gas heating through Heritage, and others have started up expressly for this reason. But next week's announcement is going to make that prospect much less attainable for many small businesses who rely on this industry. Anyone who studies gas distribution and installation will know that national suppliers are not known for buying local services or products. The benefit may be clear from Heritage's perspective, but it's not at all clear what benefit Nova Scotia businesses will see from this arrangement. So I'd like to ask the Minister of Economic Development, why is your government prepared to allow Heritage Gas to proceed with an arrangement that may put Nova Scotians out of work rather than creating jobs?
The Honourable Minister of Economic Development.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And again, the member is speculating that on the announcement and what the content will be. I certainly think it's important to allow Heritage latitude to explore all the possibilities with local companies and opportunities here in Nova Scotia, and it's up to Heritage Gas to make their announcements.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition on your final supplementary.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Heritage Gas has been holding roundtable discussions with small businesses in gas installation and distribution sector over the last year. And at every turn, they have said that they support small business. We know that the businesses involved with this industry have the expertise to deal with the demands that residential gas service will bring. And since Nova Scotia Business Inc. is supposed to be supporting and promoting local businesses, I'd like to ask the Minister responsible this. What support will you provide as a government and through NSBI to local businesses who want to offer these services, either individually or as a consortium?
The Honourable Minister of Economic Development.
Thank you very much. As the honourable member knows, certainly Nova Scotia Business Inc. and OED, the Department of Energy, Department of Natural Resources, and other government departments are here to promote and support business and business opportunities for Nova Scotia companies, and that has been done in the past, and we will ensure that that continues in the future, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. The Honourable Member Cape Breton South.
Mr. Speaker, my question today is for the Premier. Mr. Speaker, yesterday Nova Scotians were shocked by the dramatic rise in gas prices across the province. In most areas across Nova Scotia, Mr. Speaker, the price of gas is reaching almost $1 per litre. To compare this to New Brunswick, Mr. Speaker, which does not regulate gas prices, the price of gas in Moncton this morning was 73.9 cents per litre. Mr. Speaker, Nova Scotians have reason to suspect that oil companies may be taking advantage of them with predatory pricing. My question to the Premier, Mr. Speaker, is will he require the gas suppliers in this province to appear before the UARB so that Nova Scotians can find out once and for all if gas companies are taking advantage of them?
The Honourable Premier.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. There probably is not a single MLA in this House of Assembly that is not receiving comments from constituents about the current price of gas at the tank. The government will be coming forward with an approach in which we can, as far as possible, protect consumers here at the gas pump. What we will not be able to protect them from is the effect of the world price of crude, which unfortunately is now just under $40 and is predicted perhaps to go as high this summer as $45. But what we can do is protect Nova Scotians from the issue that the member opposite brings to the floor, and as well some of the other pricing policies that are occurring across the province that are angering Nova Scotians.
The Honourable Member Cape Breton South on your first supplementary.
Yes, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I guess the world prices apply in Nova Scotia, but not in Moncton. That's what the Premier is just saying, that he has no responsibility for that. It's world pricing. Mr. Speaker, there are a few constants in Nova Scotia. In spring, Mr. Speaker, you can expect rain, and when the sun shines, you can expect gas prices to again go through the roof. The rain ended on Tuesday, and gas prices went up Wednesday, Mr. Speaker. High gas prices hurt all Nova Scotians, and they can push rural business to the brink of bankruptcy. There is a major problem in this province, and the Premier seems content to think about it and hope the prices will go down out of the goodness of the oil companies' hearts. My supplementary to the Premier again is, will the Premier do the right thing and demand that oil companies come before the UARB and justify the predatory pricing here in Nova Scotia in gas pricing?
Down with the Premier.
The member opposite is aware that the current price of gasoline is hurting almost every Nova Scotian. And the government is looking at this. We have been looking at it actually for many weeks, and we will be coming forward with a suitable approach to do our part to protect the Nova Scotia consumer. And we'll do that as early as next week.
The Honourable Member Cape Breton South on your final supplementary.
It's amazing, Mr. Speaker, on a question that begs an answer. We still get this, we're looking into it, or we're doing this, or we're going to do that. It's amazing, Mr. Speaker, that the Premier hasn't figured out a way to blame Ottawa for this. You know, he's blaming them for everything else. The Premier has a responsibility in this province to ensure that Nova Scotians get fair treatment from the oil companies in this province. And again, my final supplementary to the Premier is, why won't he demand that the oil companies come before the UARB and explain why the prices of gas are going through the roof in this province?
The Honourable the Premier.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. This is an issue of great concern. Nova Scotians are hurting because of the current price of gasoline. This government cannot control the world price of crude, but there are other issues around gasoline pricing that we can become involved in, and we will.
I'm the Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Hurricane Juan destroyed the dream home of Brian and Darlene Ingalls. Their story is a true tragedy. This family started building their home last summer. They tried to insure their home while it was under construction, but were misinformed and were told they could not be insured in mid-construction. Thinking they had no choice, they decided to wait until construction was finished. The home was almost finished when Hurricane Juan struck, completely destroying the house. And Mr. Speaker, I'd like to table the photograph. To make matters worse, this family has recently found out that they don't qualify for disaster relief because, according to the EMO, they could have been insured. My question to the minister responsible for the EMO is this: will you now admit that there are major flaws in your disaster relief program?
Good question.
Now the minister responsible for the Emergency Measures Organization.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, this is indeed an unfortunate situation. Certainly, with disaster relief, it's a federal design program which the province cost shares in and signs on, so that there is federal cost sharing. And one of the tenets of the program is that if private insurance was obtainable, then it's not covered. Certainly, this government and certainly myself are concerned about some of the inflexibility surrounding those federal guidelines. And to that end, we've initiated discussions with the federal government looking at ways that program can provide more flexibility to cover people hurt by natural disasters in this province and other provinces in Canada.
I'll leave the official opposition on your first supplementary.
Well, Mr. Speaker, many people read about this family's tragedy when it hit the front page of the Chronicle Herald on October 4th. I and others, I'm sure, assumed that there would be some kind of help for this family that had lost everything in this natural disaster. Instead, the family faced confusion through their application. They spoke to no less than 10 different people before their application was rejected. They were shocked to find out that their appeal took place over the phone, and again, they were denied. Mr. Speaker, my question for the minister responsible for the Emergency Measures Organization is, will he take it upon himself to see to it that this family receives some help?
Hear, hear.
Now the minister responsible for the Emergency Measures Organization.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And as I answered in the first question, clearly this particular case is a sad case. And under the guidelines, which are federal guidelines, one of the prerequisites is if it's an insurable loss, then the federal government will not cost share in that program. And as we all know, quickly over a couple of $1 million, it's a 90% federal compensation, 10% the province. We're endeavoring to do everything we can to have the program flexibility expanded, and we'll continue to do that so that in situations like this, where it is a tragedy, that there is flexibility in the guidelines, and on a future day, hopefully there could be something done.
Now the Leader of the Official Opposition on your final supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, the minister's answer just doesn't cut it. He's the person responsible in this province for the Emergency Measures Organization. He's the one that people look to for leadership in this regard. And I want to ask the minister again, will he take responsibility to ensure that this family gets the help they need?
Hear, hear, hear.
Now the minister responsible for the Emergency Measures Organization.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, as the member opposite knows, this government always takes leadership, and certainly in dealing with Hurricane Juan, because there was no flexibility, and because the fishing industry, the forestry industry, and the farming industry had so many problems and certainly so much disaster, the province initiated a resource program on their own. So certainly the province is prepared to take leadership. Certainly in this individual case, if the member opposite wants to supply me with the material, I certainly will have a review conducted and would be my pleasure.
The honourable member for Halifax Citadel.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, my question is for the Premier. Yesterday, I asked the Premier some questions concerning video lottery gambling in Nova Scotia. I acknowledged that he was the person who came forward in a minority situation to introduce Bill 17. It placed a moratorium on the increase in number of VLTs in this province. It was sponsored by the Premier at that time. He was prepared to take action. Yesterday, he reiterated his concerns for the issues concerning people addicted to video lottery terminal gambling. Back in 1998, on June 29th, he said in this House, "We have to look at whether we are fueling the gambling addiction by the kind of VLTs that we have." Well, today, in 2004, there are more than 300 new VLTs, according to the Gaming Corporation, since this bill was passed. 300 more. My question for the Premier, would the Premier agree that Bill 17 has in fact failed to accomplish its main goal?
The Honourable Premier.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. What Bill 17 did is exactly what was intended at the time, and that was to limit the off-reserve number of VLTs in the province, and that number is 3,234, if memory serves me correctly. And it did not address the issue of the number of machines on reserve, because there were certain commitments made at that time by the previous government that would preclude the legislation applying in that particular regard. We continue to have negotiations with leaders on reserves to come up with a suitable approach to the number of machines on reserve.
Now, member Halifax Citadel, on your first supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, I think it's noteworthy that that contract that he referred to that was signed by the previous government was just renewed this past March 31st, I believe. On June 24th, 1998, the Premier said in Hansard, by providing this kind of video lottery terminal, not catering to gambling as an entertainment, but are we catering to the addict? Evidence is starting to accumulate that we have the most addictive VLTs that are available. That was 6 years ago, and since that time, we've introduced bill exchangers in Nova Scotia. Now, to Nova Scotia machines. Bill exchangers are the items that allow for us to insert paper bills so that we get coins out and somebody doesn't have to leave the machine and actually exchange the money with a human being. My question for the Premier, in an attempt to help the thousands of people addicted to VLT gambling, will he agree today, now, to remove bill exchangers from VLTs in Nova Scotia?
The Honourable the Premier.
I refer that to the Minister responsible.
The Honourable Minister responsible for the Nova Scotia Gaming. The Honourable Minister of Finance.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And the honourable member raises one of the issues that came with some of the machines and one of the new features. What he failed to mention and what he didn't ask was, what about the timeout features? What about the limiting of play features? And those are features on the new machines, Mr. Speaker, that are put in there to remind people and to give people the opportunity to be more responsible. It's part of the whole process.
Member Halifax Citadel, on your final supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, if that minister understood fully what those features that were introduced 2 years ago actually accomplish, he would realize that they are retroactive to the people who are suffering from gambling addictions. They didn't work. They're not working now. This government can't hide behind this issue. 38 cents out of every dollar that Nova Scotians put into video lottery terminals never comes back. And I go back to a quote that came from the Premier back regarding Bill 17 on June 29th, 1998. He said, "This bill isn't perfect and it's not going to end here." He said to the Chronicle Herald, "Even though I don't have the answer on June 18th, 1998 to the revenue shortfall, I don't think that precludes us from starting to analyze what we're doing." New Brunswick had a plebiscite. They let the people decide. My question for the Premier, will the Premier commit to a plebiscite for the removal of VLTs?
The Honourable the Premier.
What the Premier will commit to, Mr. Speaker, is to go forward with a very progressive approach to regulated gambling.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. During the last election, the Premier made this promise in his blueprint. Based on recommendations from working groups currently examining rural palliative care, we will identify and fund the next steps to expand access to end-of-life care. Given, Mr. Speaker, that this is National Palliative Care Week, it would be a good time for the government to make good on the promise of expanded services for the end-of-life care. Mr. Speaker, I want to ask the Minister of Health the questions that the Nova Scotia Hospice Palliative Care Association asked the Premier in March, and I'll quote them because they put it very well. When will the promises and the planning stop and the action and implementation begin? Your campaign platform promised palliative care services to Nova Scotians. When will this happen?
The Honourable Premier. Order, please. Was a minute from the Premier or the Minister of Health? The Honourable Premier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I refer that to the Minister of Health.
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, the honourable member is talking about an approach with respect to health care that we are very much involved in within the department, and we are now working with our partners to develop the service delivery guidelines that would be used right across the province with respect to the provision of palliative care. It is our intention to, when those guidelines are developed, to move forward with the approach regarding palliative care in this province.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition on your first supplementary.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, it was the Premier who traveled around this province with the blueprint making these promises. I'm going to table a copy of a chart that was provided to the Premier by the Nova Scotia Hospice Palliative Care Association. It's an inventory of the funded palliative care services in Nova Scotia. The chart shows that there are 10 funded palliative care beds for the whole province, and Mr. Speaker, none outside of the HRM. Mr. Speaker, hospice palliative care can relieve the pressure on acute care beds, and groups like the VON King's Hospice Foundation are willing to help the government meet these needs if the government is only willing to work with them. So my question to the Premier is this: the Nova Scotia Hospice Palliative Care Association is asking the government to support funded and sustainable palliative care services in Nova Scotia. Will he make that commitment today?
Honourable Premier.
Mr. Speaker, the member opposite brings an excellent topic to the attention of the House, and that is the topic of end-of-life care. What we have seen across the province is a number of models that are being used in the various regions. In my own particular area, we have one of the most progressive approaches to palliative or end-of-life care that exists in the province, thanks to the leadership of Dennis MacDonald and those that work on his palliative care committee, and it is working extremely well. We are looking to provide province-wide a level of service that is equivalent to one that we enjoy in my particular area. Now, there are other models that are before government, and the member opposite mentioned the hospice approach. It is one that I am interested in. It's one that the government is looking at, and it is one that may well prove to be the model that other regions may wish to follow once we have the wherewithal to move full bore ahead on end-of-life care. What I can say is that the issue is one that must be addressed by government because of the rapidly aging population that our healthcare system must now be in a position to serve.
Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition on your final supplementary.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I appreciate the Premier's remarks, and he must know that 4 provinces have designated palliative care as a core service under the provincial health plans.
Good point.
Unfortunately, Mr. Speaker, Nova Scotia is not one of them. So I'd like to ask the Minister of Health, how can he possibly justify the continued inequity, and will he commit today to designating palliative care as a core service and allow Nova Scotians to die with dignity regardless of where they reside.
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And as the Premier indicated in answer to the previous supplementary, we are in a process of establishing a standard approach across this province, finding the best services that we can provide. And when they are identified and we're satisfied in collaboration with our partners in the delivery of health care, this government will move forward with the palliative care program in this province, Mr. Speaker. It is a priority with respect to moving forward. Thank you.
The Honourable Member for Glace Bay.
Mr. Speaker, my question is for the Minister of Health. Mr. Speaker, in keeping with the recurring ministerial theme of ignoring issues until there's a crisis, I would like to once again remind the Minister that the devastating effects of OxyContin in the Cape Breton community have not gone away. Mr. Speaker, Direction 180 in Halifax is a methadone clinic, and it's an excellent example of a community-based addiction service provider that exists because needs are not being met. And many would say, Mr. Speaker, that needs are not being met in Cape Breton as well. So my question to the Minister is, given that this successful model exists, why is there such a distinct lack of forward-looking thinking when it comes to tackling addiction problems in the Cape Breton Regional Municipality?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Mr. Speaker, it is interesting that the question, when it is brought forward, is always focused on the Cape Breton Regional Municipality, because there is a real problem there that needs to be addressed. And that is why, Mr. Speaker, under the leadership of the District Health Authority, there is a local community initiative that is dealing with this. Mr. Speaker, I'm told that they continue to meet. And as a result of that initiative, Mr. Speaker, the local medical practitioners in the area have indicated their desire to become involved. The College of Physicians and Surgeons in the province have responded by reminding all of their colleagues of their membership of the need for them to be vigilant with respect to prescriptions. Mr. Speaker, the Minister of Justice has indicated that we are prepared to work with the Cape Breton Regional Police Force in terms of establishing a greater police effort in this matter, Mr. Speaker.
Order, please.
We will continue to
Order, please. The Honourable Member Glace Bay in your first supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, you know, this government loves to pit one area of the province against another. Sometime it's just going to have to stop. Wait times at this clinic in Halifax, Mr. Speaker, 2 months. And interestingly enough, Mr. Speaker, there are 14 people from Cape Breton who are either currently receiving support or waiting to get into that Halifax clinic. So my question for the Minister is, given that you have this excellent community-based model and the fact that Direction 180 is servicing clients from Cape Breton, doesn't it seem logical that this type of clinic be made available in an area that is currently struggling with OxyContin abuse problems?
Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, I did reference the community initiative that is involved. We look forward to the recommendations from that community initiative. And Mr. Speaker, I would anticipate that their recommendations would include a wide range of measures that would be appropriate with respect to the situation in Cape Breton, and I look forward to those recommendations.
The Honourable Member Glace Bay on your final supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, I'm talking about people that are crying for help now. I'm talking about people that need help right now. I'm talking about people that have died that were crying for help, Mr. Minister. In this case, and note with interest, Mr. Speaker, that the former Minister of Health, remember her? The former Minister of Health provided funding for the Halifax Methadone Clinic to the tune of $240,000, and funding is available again this year.
Question, please.
So my question for the Minister is, please tell me, why is this government funding a methadone clinic in Halifax and it will not fund a methadone clinic in Cape Breton?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Mr. Speaker, we will take seriously the recommendations that come forward, and Mr. Speaker.
Order, please. Order, please. All Minister of Health.
Mr. Speaker, the honourable member doesn't add anything, whatever, to the approach that's required here for us to bring resolution to this very difficult situation. Mr. Speaker, we will take seriously and we will respond appropriately to the recommendations that we receive from the local initiative that is addressing this. And Mr. Speaker, there has been no refusal on our part with respect to anything that would come forward. We will take all recommendations seriously, Mr. Speaker, and they will be based on far better professional.
Order, please. Order, please. Order, please. The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I thought he had another question. Mr. Speaker, in 2002, the province signed an agreement with Newcastle Hotels to manage its 3 signature resorts. Staff at these resorts, who were employees of the province, were initially seconded to the new company, receiving the same benefits and pay levels. That arrangement, Mr. Speaker, will end in August of this year, and so will the provincial pension plans, the medical benefits, the pay levels. All of that will come to an end. Long-term disability benefits, I should say, perhaps not the pay levels. I asked the Minister of Tourism, Heritage and Culture what is being done to protect the benefits these employees have worked for years to attain.
Honourable Minister of Tourism and Culture.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and the member reflects on the private sector management contract which we signed with Newcastle a few years ago. We did move forward with regards to putting in place a framework with respect to some of those employees, Mr. Speaker, and I believe that we treated them in a fair and equitable manner.
The Honourable Leader of Official Opposition on your final first supplementary.
Well, that's right, Mr. Speaker. The arrangement made kept in place their contracts. The change that's about to take place will affect about a dozen long-time staff with less than 5 years to go until retirement. The loss of benefits in August would mean that some staff will face reduced pensions while others will have to postpone their retirement for years. The company managing the resort is quite willing to extend the agreement for this handful of employees so that they don't lose their benefits. My question to the Minister is this: will the department extend provincial benefits for the employees closest to retirement to prevent this hardship from occurring?
Minister of Tourism and Culture.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, the member brings up a good point. We've treated employees fairly in the past, and Mr. Speaker will review that. And should we be able to move forward on an initiative that continues to be fair to those employees, we will.
Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition on your final supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to bring to the Minister's attention that the cost of extending the provincial benefits to the longest-serving employees would be minimal. The precedent has been set with the transition of staff in other provincial institutions, such as the QE2 Health Sciences Centre. So my question to the Minister is this: will you agree to meet with the employees' representatives to work toward a solution to this situation?
Good question.
Honourable Minister of Tourism and Culture.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and certainly I will have the appropriate staff within the department do so, Mr. Speaker. I also want to point out to the House, though, Mr. Speaker, that when we came into office, Mr. Speaker, with respect to the resorts, this province was losing over $1 million a year when that crew over there was looking after the resorts, Mr. Speaker. We are very fortunate now to be making millions of dollars in capital investments in those resorts, and we are now bringing a profit to the people of Nova Scotia instead of losing money, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Annapolis.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question is for the Minister of Health. The challenges currently facing Queen's General Hospital in Liverpool has the people of my constituency of Annapolis wondering what the future holds for Soldiers Memorial. An anaesthetist is leaving Queen's General. Soldiers Memorial lost a surgeon last year. Sterilization equipment is being transferred to from Queen's General to Scotia Regional. Sterilization equipment is being rumored to be transferred from Soldiers Memorial to Valley Regional. There seems to be a pattern developing here, Mr. Speaker. My question is for the Minister. Could the Minister please elaborate, given the loss of the surgeon and the rumored relocation of sterilization equipment, whether is it his plan to downsize Soldiers Memorial Hospital?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Those plans are not plans that are made by the Minister of Health. They're made by the district health authorities.
Now, member for Annapolis on your first supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, the people of Annapolis are still wondering about what the role is for Soldiers Memorial Hospital. If this minister is truly committed to a strong regional health care system, strong community hospitals like Soldiers have to be given a clear indication of the role they will play in the acute care health care system. My question is, will the minister commit today that he will contact the DHAs to express his commitment to a strong rural health care system and request that no further services be removed until a full discussion as to the future role of community hospitals?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Mr. Speaker, what we do commit to with the district health authorities across this province is that they will have our support to provide the very best medical services that they can provide given the resources that are available.
The Honourable Member for Annapolis on your final supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, a little over a year ago, the surgery theatre at Soldiers Memorial was renovated. Now it is being underutilized. Surgeons at Valley Regional are crying for OR time, and wait lists are growing. My question is to the minister, will he commit today to a dialogue with the appropriate parties to develop a plan to use the extra available OR time at Soldiers for additional day surgeries in order to reduce wait times and pressures on Valley Regional?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. We have provided Valley Regional with $1 million to do just that, to plan for how they are going to use the facilities that they have more effectively and what it is that they need to do in the future with respect to sustaining that more effective use of their facilities. That is a process that is ongoing, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Sackville-Cobequid.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question also is for the Minister of Health. Fabry disease is a genetic disorder which seriously affects the kidneys, the heart, the brain, and the nervous system, Mr. Speaker. A new enzyme replacement therapy is offering for the first measurable relief for people suffering from this rare disease. These patients have been informed that the trial period is over and the supply of this medication will soon come to an end, Mr. Speaker.
Shame.
My question to the Minister of Health, what measures is your department taking to address this pressure situation for Fabry patients, some of them who are in our gallery today?
Honourable Minister of Health.
I thank the honourable member for the question, and indeed the honourable member is addressing a matter that is of very significant concern to the sufferers of that disease. And Mr. Speaker, currently the drugs in question are before the Canadian Expert Drug Advisory Committee, and we expect recommendations from that committee in July. In the meantime, before we can take any decisions, we have to receive those recommendations. In the meantime, arrangements have been made for the drugs that are currently under use to continue until August 1st. There was some question with respect to one of those suppliers. We have this week, I received a commitment from them that those drugs will continue to be available until August 1st.
The Honourable Member for Sackville-Cobequid on your first supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. These problems experienced by the Fabry patients securing accessible treatment programs raises a bigger issue, Mr. Speaker. Pharmaceutical companies, anxious to recover their research and development costs quickly, price new treatments far out of the reach for most patients, Mr. Speaker. Right. This is a major issue for patients and governments across this country. I ask the Minister, what action is this government taking on the provincial and federal fronts to ensure new drug treatments are kept accessible for patients who so desperately need them?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the honourable member for the question. And indeed, he puts his finger on on a matter that is a very significant challenge, not just for this government, but for all governments across Canada. It is something that that we are addressing with all of our other jurisdictions across the country. We will continue to address that, Mr. Speaker. However, it is very accurate to say this is a very significant challenge for all of us.
The honourable member for Sackville-Cobequid on your final supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Fabry patients are understandably anxious as they watch the clock tick down towards the end of this trial period and the end of having their treatment covered. With this enzyme replacement therapy, these Nova Scotians, they've been able to have an improved or have improved their conditions and their living daily routines. And their ability to cope with this disease. So I asked the minister, will he commit today to meet with the Atlantic Fabry Information and Support Group and keep the lines of communications open to address their fears of potentially losing this access to this treatment?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
I'm not certain that I clearly understood everything that the honourable member was asking, but I will say that we are doing our best. I know that we're in contact with Dr. West, who is on a continuous basis, and we're kept up to date by him, and we keep him up to date with respect to what's going on in our discussions with the companies involved. And Mr. Speaker, perhaps if the members would provide just a bit of latitude relative to the time here, because it is a very significant. It's my understanding that there is a line of communication that takes place, and if there isn't, I'll see that one is established.
Thank you. Order, please. Order, please. All member Cape Breton Nova.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, my question is to the Minister of the Environment. Mr. Speaker, black coal dust continues to blanket my community. A few months ago, the Minister of the Environment met with members of my community and assured them that this coal dust problems would be under control because the proper mechanisms were in place. The coal dust problem is no longer under control. Today, I've been contacted by residents who have had enough of this black dust everywhere as they turn. Mr. Speaker, my question to the Minister of the Environment and Labour is, we are dealing with health hazards throughout my community for over 100 years. When are you going to fix this problem?
Honourable Minister of Environment and Labour.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Certainly the matter has been brought to my attention, and we've asked staff to look into this. It's our intention to correct this problem and ensure that the air remains clean for the residents of the area.
Now, member for Cape Breton Nova on your first supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, Kendra Christie is fed up with continual blanket of coal and pet coke. There's black dust on her windows, in her pool, inside her home, everywhere. Mr. Christie can't seem to get rid of this dust. She worries about the effect it is having on her health, the health of her 13-year-old son. Her son can't breathe properly, suffers allergy. Mrs. Christie says the dust can only be making this worse. My question for the Minister of Environment is clearly, the control measures aren't working. What steps are you going to take to bring this problem under control?
Minister of Environment and Labour.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We certainly are reviewing the situation. We've certainly listened to the complaints, and we will be doing everything we can to evaluate the control measures and ensure that they are adequate to take care of the problem.
Honourable member for Cape Breton Nova on your final supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, coal dust has been a problem in my community for years. There's no excuse. Coal dust can be controlled. It just simply takes a little more effort. I have no doubt that the residents of Halifax wouldn't tolerate this problem, and my community shouldn't be forced to either. My question is to the Minister. How can you possibly justify the levels of pollution that my community is forced to live with every day?
Honourable Minister of Environment and Labour.
Mr. Speaker, I take this issue, I'm concerned about this issue the same as the member opposite, and that's the reason that I traveled to Cape Breton and viewed one of the sites with the member opposite We looked at the control measures. We tried to identify what issues were where there could be improvements, and we will continue to do that. We will continue to work with the community to ensure that the problem is resolved.
The honourable member for Victoria the Lakes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question is for the Honourable Minister of Sport and Recreation. Mr. Speaker, Daniel Canning from Middle River in Victoria the Lakes, Cape Breton, won the silver medal at the Canadian National Powerlifting Championship in March. We honoured that young man here.
Order, please. Order, please. Order, please. The honourable member for Victoria the Lakes has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Daniel Canning from Middle River, Victoria the Lakes, Cape Breton, won the silver medal at the Canadian National Powerlifting Championships in Ontario last March. He won silver, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Canning is a 16-year-old elite athlete, and he will be representing Canada in South Africa this September. And ironically enough, Mr. Speaker, the boys' hero is Arnold Schwarzenegger, and that in South Africa was where Mr. Schwarzenegger won his world championships, and this is what this young man will be competing for in September. But my question to the minister is, he has been denied funding by the minister's department, and my question to the minister is, why is Mr. Canning being denied funding to represent our province in Canada and South Africa?
Honourable Minister of Sport and Rec. Honourable Minister of Tourism and Culture.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and thank you to the member for the question. Indeed, Mr. Speaker, through the program which is there in place for our elite athletes, Mr. Speaker, there are certain parameters around specifically what athlete and as to what level are eligible for assistance with regards to the criteria.
Now, member for Victoria the Lakes on your first supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, the honourable minister knows of this case. And I was under the understanding that you had to win the Canadian Championships before you could go and receive funding. Well, this boy has done that. And I'm quoting from a letter here. The allocation committee carefully considered your application and is unable to offer you financial assistance at this time. I wish you the best if you pursue your sporting activities. Well, Mr. Speaker, I would like the minister to intervene personally. And why will the minister not provide funding as requested by Daniel Canning?
The Honourable Minister of Tourism and Culture.
Mr. Speaker, I will certainly review that particular file with the staff, Mr. Speaker, and I guess since we're talking about Mr. Schwarzenegger, I'll be back with an answer.
The honourable member for Victoria the Lakes. Order, please. The honourable member for Victoria Lakes in your final supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And in response to the honourable minister being back, I'm already back, Mr. Speaker. There's a letter going to your office today from my office requesting reconsideration. Mr. Speaker, it would be a travesty and an embarrassment to this athlete, to Victoria the Lakes, to the province, and to this government if Daniel Canning cannot afford to go to South Africa to represent this government. If this young student athlete who is a model for today's youth, instead of being involved in criminal activities which would cost community and government a lot more money, if we can't fund this individual, Mr. Speaker, who can we fund? Why won't the minister fund this very deserving young athlete when he represents the province in September?
The Honourable Minister of Sport and Recreation.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I certainly recognize that the member's concern with respect to this particular athlete and all our athletes, Mr. Speaker, and we do provide a great deal of funding with respect to our Canada Games and a number of other areas, including for elite athletes. But, Mr. Speaker, I will review this file with our staff and, Mr. Speaker, to ensure that the appropriate measures were taken to check on eligibility.
The honourable member for Dartmouth South, Portland Valley.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question is for the Minister of Community Services. Mr. Speaker, I would like clarification on what the Minister of Community Services meant yesterday when he said he didn't agree with my assumptions regarding single parents being excluded from university. The minister might have been referring to the concept that we honor our mothers on Mother's Day in particular for their love and sacrifices. Or perhaps he was questioning his department's policy, which forces mothers off social assistance into further poverty if they wish to attend university or any post-secondary program longer than 2 years. So my question for the minister, which indefensible position of his department was he defending?
The Honourable Minister of Community Services.
Mr. Speaker, I thank the member opposite for bringing that question forward today. As you'll recall, it was at the end of question period yesterday, and I had 8 seconds, so that was the best I could do at the time. But today I get a chance to embellish. First of all, Mr. Speaker, I'd like to make the point that this is about single parents. There are some single mothers and there are some single fathers. But with regards to her specific question, what I would like to point out is the supports that are in place for single parents, such as, let's say, a single parent with a family of 2. They get the National Child Benefit. That is worth $6,000 a year after tax to pay for the cost of food and clothing. They're eligible for public housing. That could easily be worth $8,000. Subsidized child care species, that would be worth another $8,000. That in itself is $22,000 worth of after-tax income to support them. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We do a great deal for single parents.
Member Dartmouth South, Portland Valley, in your first supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, I just want to say that the policies of the Department of Community Services keep single parents impoverished. Mr. Speaker, a single person might be able to barely survive on a student loan, but single mothers cannot support themselves and their children on student loans. So this policy puts university out of the reach for these single parents. The statistics are clear that a woman's best chance at a reasonable income is to have a university degree. Mr. Speaker, I ask the Minister of Community Services, knowing that women with a university education are more likely to break the poverty cycle, why does his department continue this defeatist policy?
Honourable Minister of Community Services.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And following up on my previous response, again, we've identified in this case a single parent with 2 children would have approximately $22,000 worth of after-tax income, which is basically a grant to support them. In addition to that, the student loan program is an income-tested program. It's interest-free, goes for 2 years beyond the graduation. And really, Mr. Speaker, there's a tremendous amount of support that is there to assist not only single parents, but all students to better their education and have a good career. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Member Dartmouth South, Portland Valley, in your final supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Doctors, nurses, teachers, and speech pathologists are in short supply in this province. All of these careers require university training beyond the 2 years funded by the Department of Community Services. Even the Advisory Council on the Status of Women advised the department not to further reduce educational opportunities for women. So I ask the Minister of Community Services, why not offer single mothers on social assistance a Mother's Day present and remove this discriminatory policy?
There you go. Minister of Community Services.
Mr. Speaker, I would like to point out that the department does support single parents, social assistance recipients to go back to community college. They can get up to 2 years with complete support, room and board. That is a substantial investment by society, by this government, and that is the right thing to do, to give them the chance to develop a meaningful career. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honourable member for Kings West.
Mr. Speaker, my question is for the Minister of Education. 4 years ago, this government divided the Southwest Regional School Board into 2 boards with limited authority, the South Shore District Board and the Tri-County Board. A provincially appointed superintendent reported directly to the Minister of Education, controlling finances, human resources, busing, school maintenance, and operations. Mr. Speaker, this model does not give these boards the same autonomy as other regional boards across the province, and it has simply not functioned well. In a few months, this model will expire, and the government must propose a new structure. Unfortunately, Mr. Speaker, it appears that they are determined to do this without regard for the wishes of the members of those boards, and they are proposing a shared service unit model. That would continue to restrict the powers of these 2 boards. My question to the Minister, why is this government determined to treat the South Shore District Board and the Tri-County differently than all the other regional boards in this province?
Order. Order, please. Order, please. The question on member put before the House is partially in the Financial Measures Act. And secondly, order, please. And the second part of it's part of a bill before this House. It is. So the honourable member would ask him to put the second question, please.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I cannot understand why the government is proposing a solution that does not take into account the input of people who will be directly impacted by the proposal and who understand the situation best. In fact, I understand members of the boards attempted to solicit the support of the 4 government members in the region with apparently little success. My question to the minister: why is the minister not taking into account the wishes of the South Shore and Tri-County school boards?
Order, please. Order, please. You know, it's hard to order, please. It's hard to differentiate between the Honourable Minister of Education like to answer in regards to policy of the government as opposed to the Financial Measures Act or specifically the question. Policy only. The Honourable Minister of Education.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. When the pilot structure was set up, the legislation had a sunset clause, and it happens to be this year, and therefore new legislation was drafted. I will be making some reference to that, Mr. Speaker, in my summation when at the close of the estimates for the Department of Education. But I want to tell the honourable member that the pilot governance structure, there was an independent committee that reviewed that structure and made recommendations about where to go, whether to continue the pilot structure or to go back to individual boards. The decision was to go back to individual boards, and we have done that, Mr. Speaker, and I'd be quite prepared to table the report on the assessment of pilot structure 2003.
The honourable member for Kings West.
Well, Mr. Speaker, DHAs participate in a number of shared services, both in clinical and support services, and also at one time financial. And apparently in August of this year, DHAs 4 to 6 moved to remove financial services. Mr. Speaker, the model being proposed removes the crucial role of financial management from the individual boards and requires the 2 boards agree on any financial or judiciary disputes. How this will work remains very unclear. The word on the street is that the government is taking a, well, we'll work it out as we go along approach. Mr. Speaker, this simply is not good enough. My question to the minister: will the minister consider introducing separate legislation on this issue to allow the matter to be properly discussed and debated, and to allow those most affected by the matter to make representation before the Law Amendments Committee?
Minister of Education.
Mr. Speaker, there is legislation dealing with the restructuring of those 2 boards. It's before the House now, and that legislation will continue through the process.
Pictou West.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Last week, I asked the Minister of Transportation and Public Works about the 200 bridges in Nova Scotia that are considered substandard. He admitted that many of these bridges were built in the era of horse and buggy. But, Mr. Speaker, people today, they don't use horse and buggy. They use cars and trucks and buses, and many of those bridges have weight restrictions because of their poor conditions. People rely on these bridges every day. So I asked the Minister, how does he honestly think replacing only 66 out of the 200 bridges is going to solve the problem?
The Honourable Minister of Transportation and Public Works.
Mr. Speaker, the situation with the steel truss bridges is not safety. It's simply the fact, Mr. Speaker, that these bridges were built back in the days of the horse and buggy, as the honourable member just said, and not built for modern standards and heavy trucks. So in consequence, many of the bridges, Mr. Speaker, we have weight restrictions on them.
The honourable member for Pictou West on your first supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, it is about safety. I want to tell you about the Durham Bridge, which crosses the West River in Pictou County. It's considered substandard. ATV News had a story last night showing the rusting holes and the drooping girders on the Durham Bridge. Residents are very worried not only about their own safety, but the safety of the school children who cross that bridge every day. So my question to the minister, since we've had bridges that fall down in this province already, how much longer is this government going to gamble with the safety of residents who cross these bridges every day?
Honourable Minister of Transportation and Public Works.
Mr. Speaker, I don't have any history of bridges falling down in this province. I know of bridges being damaged by vehicles crossing them, which have caused bridges to collapse, Mr. Speaker. But, Mr. Speaker, that can happen to any bridge. Mr. Speaker, the honourable member is referring to the Durham Bridge, I believe, and that bridge, Mr. Speaker, is safe. It does require some repairs. Those repairs are being carried out. And, Mr. Speaker, that bridge is due for replacement in 2005.
The honourable member for Pictou West, and your final supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The minister suggested that we not worry about the age of our bridges. Recently, you cited bridges in Europe.